You're listening to Secure Insights with NDK Cyber. I'm James Morris. This week, I'm joined by cybersecurity experts Andy Woodard and Sean Kilbourn from Highpoint to discuss how hackers are using deepfake technology. These attacks focus on impersonating individuals, and as the technology grows, it becomes quite convincing. With these capabilities out there, anyone could be on the other end of the camera.
So we are now live. Well, welcome to the real version of Secure Insights with NDK Cyber. You'd have just heard there how easy it is to spoof a conversation between two people with readily available information that's out there on the internet in the public domain. So delighted today to be joined by Sean and Andy from Highpoint. So to save me butchering an explanation of who you guys are and what you do, are you okay to give us a brief overview of that, and then we can get stuck into the topic at hand?
Sure, sounds good. I'm Sean Kilbourn. I've been in the cybersecurity industry for going on 2 decades, various different avenues and environments I've worked in, public sector, private sector, and recently I was a deputy CISO, and I've been on board here at Highpoint since May as the Director of Cybersecurity Services.
Nice.
And likewise, I work on the cybersecurity team with Sean at Highpoint as an ethical hacker, penetration tester, doing consulting for all of our clients and finding all sorts of vulnerabilities and risks. I've been doing that for several years now, and prior to that was doing a lot of DoD cybersecurity, cyber operations work.
Nice. Okay, cool. Well, guys, I'm very excited to get stuck into this one, especially given we've literally just demonstrated how easy this can be. So there's so many avenues we could go on the back of this, but I guess if we start with this is out there, this is happening right now. The general public, let's forget enterprises for a moment and just look at sort of the general public, how they could be at risk to this, how they're open to it. Well, what are your guys' thoughts on that so far?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're seeing a lot of the same kind of common attack vectors that have been around for a while. They're just being enhanced with this new technology. So a lot of scams, identity theft, and general just impersonation for fraud, right? And really the interesting thing is, like, as this technology gets better, right, they're kind of doing this research and security surveys, and they found that over 70% of people are not confident in their ability to tell the difference between a real and a cloned voice. And right, that percentage is only going to go up as the technology improves. So with that kind of to the public, one of the most common vectors, right, is these scams, and in particular targeting seniors. So I think the really common attack vector you see is a lot of calls from family members, right? You're getting the phone number spoofed. They answer it, it sounds like one of their family members, and right, they're asking for that, Western Union money deposit, or they're asking for, hey, I need this gift card. Could you, go to the store and get me this? And right, if it's somebody's, grandson or granddaughter and niece, nephew, and they're, none the wiser about this attack vector, more than likely they're going to go ahead and, do that. So they're seeing a lot higher success rates with these common scams as well, thanks to this technology.
Wow. Yeah, it's really interesting. It's to the point now where are we even really us right now as we're having this conversation, right, James? I mean, as far as you know, I could be AI again right now. So yeah. It's really a scary thought proposition, and the targeting of people who might not be, up to speed with various technologies as a whole, even getting phone calls and things like browsing the internet might be a lot for the older generation of folks that are being targeted, like Andy was saying. If you get a call from your, if you're an 80-year-old woman and you get a call from your grandson and he's asking for money, you have no reason to really doubt it. If it's his voice and it sounds like him, it must be him. So the FBI actually just released a public service announcement last week talking about this very thing and how to combat it, which we're going to get into a little later today. But it's a very real concern, a very real threat out there. And we're also seeing a lot of misinformation and fake news being spread to influence public opinion. You might get a Twitter posting and it's Elon Musk saying, hey, go ahead and send me Bitcoin, and I'll promise I'll double your money, right? And it seems like Elon Musk, and he seems like a good guy, so why not? He might do it. And we're also seeing a lot of. We just recently went through the election cycle here in the U.S., and with the presidential election and the general elections going on, there was actually some videos flying back and forth, which were deemed to be fake campaign videos, and it was virtually impossible to tell that the candidate, didn't actually say those words. So we're starting to see it in light of just everyday watching TV or browsing the internet. We're seeing a big uptick in blackmail and extortion activities that are using fabricated compromised videos. So somebody might put together a video of you and say, hey, I have this video of you assumingly doing something wrong or illegal, and I'm going to release it unless you give me money. And so you're starting to see an uptick in that. There's a lot of celebrities that are being targeted with fake, deepfake pornography channels and things like that. And we're also seeing a large issue approaching the youth of our world, right? We're seeing a lot of teenagers being targeted with fake sexual videos or any type of videos, extortion attempts on them, or blackmail. And recently, it was highlighted at a conference that I was at that unfortunately, one of those teenagers ended up being so embarrassed by it, they took their own life. So this is unfortunate, very unfortunate, and it's very impactful. And we're seeing more and more of it as this technology increases.
That's pretty shocking, to be fair. And I think like what gets me on it is the scale that it's now able to operate at. I think back 15, 20 years ago, and I remember being at home, my parents' house, and getting a phone call from somebody pretending to be Microsoft. And okay, quite naive to it at the time, but if you didn't know better then you run with it. And my parents, I'm sure they will not mind me saying this, but they have sort of gone down that route. And I've gone, no, hang up the phone, it's not Microsoft, But now it's on a whole different level of, that example you used of, the grandson ringing their grandmother. You've only got to apply a slight bit of pressure to that situation, that they're stuck in a foreign country or somewhere, and it's their voice. It just seems so, that's available to do at the fingertips, whereas before that would have been much more of a research-based task to do that might have taken weeks to put together, whereas now it seems almost instant.
Right.
Which is pretty worrying. And so that's on the public front. And like you say, we'll come on to how we can sort of, verify against this, or verify is probably the word to use. But on the more enterprise side of the house, it's not just obviously the members of the public, so to speak, that are being hit by this, but also your enterprises around the world, right?
Absolutely. And you're seeing, likewise, a huge uptick on the enterprise side, the cyber attack side. I think at that kind of enterprise level, right, they've always been early to adopt new attack vectors and new technologies, right? Because you have to stay ahead of the blue teams, essentially. So one of the most common attack vectors we've seen kind of in the public light regarding this has been targeting things like invoice fraud via impersonation, and in particular, right, going after some of the high-ranking leadership of companies. So we've seen multiple incidents, but there's been a major one where this multinational company, right, had a deepfake of their CFO actually reach out to the finance department of their Hong Kong office. And so kind of interesting how they went about it too, because it started with more of a traditional phishing campaign, right? So they sent this email posing as the CFO to one of the employees, and the employee actually responded and said, hey, this seems a little fishy, this doesn't quite seem right. And the fake CFO responded and said, okay, understood, let's hop on a Zoom call, because that's the proper way to do things. What they didn't know at the time was, right, the Zoom link was it was the spoofed deepfake CFO. So they got on the call with the attacker posing as the actual CFO. They thought that they checked themselves and went through the right validation process. But ultimately, they ended up modifying invoices, right? They corrected this routing number, sent over $25 million across 15 different transactions, and the attackers just got away with it.
Yeah, it's It's crazy. Recently there was a article posted around a U.S. company who is a cybersecurity awareness company. So this is a little bit interesting because it's kind of a pun. So the company KnowBe4 had hired a remote software engineer, which is pretty common across the world, right? To have fully remote employees that may or may not even be local to the area of the company. And this person turned out to be a North Korean hacker. And this person was using legitimate US documentation and impersonated an individual via deepfake technologies and was able to go through the entire hiring process and actually get hired and start working. And that means full access to the network. You have an internal account with the company, all the things that an employee would have. And the way that it was identified was actually some analysis of the employee's network traffic as he was trying to access some malware. And that started unfolding things. And before they knew it, they figured out, wow, this isn't even a legitimate US person. And this person doesn't really exist. It's actually a North Korean hacker. So that's, just a good example of how crazy this whole deepfake AI thing has become.
That's levels above, again, like I don't mean to sort of harp on about sort of 5-10 years ago, but you might get somebody using a false bit of identification, but these things tend to be caught fairly quickly. But even, brands like KnowBe4, who are obviously very well known in the space, they caught this person, which is awesome. But
right.
it kind of makes you think how many others are out there that we haven't caught yet, maybe to companies that are less assuming or maybe less, I don't know, there seems to be maybe a culture in some industries of like, why would they target us type thing, so do we need to be that hot on our security?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, unfortunately, minimizing your influence in your sector doesn't necessarily make you less of a target, right? So, and even in the case that we just mentioned, a security awareness company who's out there literally preaching about and evangelizing the fact that this stuff is dangerous was even duped in this. So everyone is a potential victim, really.
Just thinking, does that put sort of an extra target on you if you are a cybersecurity company? Does that give some sort of extra kudos to the threat actors that get in? Are they sort of like, oh yeah, we got this scalp, as opposed to some, I don't know, but an awareness company, there's all kinds of ironies in there, I guess.
I think you kind of have that inherent trust with a lot of other organizations, so it's a common supply chain vector, right? We've seen it before with things like SolarWinds, right? Going after this organization that's, a security company should have great security, is trusted by all these other orgs, and probably has high level privileges, within those organizations. So that's, something that's just going to continue to be a vector.
I guess as well, once you break down that company you used before that sent the 25 million to the threat actors there, you had the employee had their wall of trust, but once that was then, I guess, broken through or developed, however you want to call it, okay, cool, I've done my check, this is the CFO. It's all hands to it. There's no sort of further verification or anything after that. So getting into it then, if we are, take away the enterprise stuff for the moment, if we're sort of members of the public, the personal stuff in your home life, what sort of things can we put in that will help prevent against these sort of attacks?
Sure. So first and foremost, one of the things you can do with your friends and family is have a code word. This is going all the way back to the formation of nations to verify authenticity of another party, right? Whether it's a written letter or a phone call or whatever, to verify that authenticity, a code word is a good example of something you can have that you share with just that specific person, and therefore only they should know it as well as you. And you don't really want to pick something generic like your wife's name or your pet's name, something that can be easily discerned in social media or via a quick search on your identity. Maybe something like, if it's your grandfather, a good example could be your childhood nickname that your grandfather called you when you were 5. Probably not something that's going to be publicized on the internet. And so something like that, that's maybe a, close kept secret or something that only you two would share and know, is a good example of that. Another good thing to do in general, and this is good advice just for good cybersecurity hygiene aside from deepfaking and the things we're talking about today, but a good thing to do is really lock down your social media accounts to only people that you actually know. So for example, if you get a random friend request on Facebook or a LinkedIn request from somebody at a company and you say, hey, I know that company, but I don't know this individual, sure, I'll allow their access. What that's doing is it's opening you up to a more visible model of, at this point now, if your privacy settings are relaxed for friends or people that you're linked in with, they can now data mine and harvest your information as well as the other people that you're connected to. And being now that they're a mutual acquaintance of you, it's kind of the transit of trust property, right? So, hey, I trust Andy, and Andy's friend, Bob, is coming to me asking for something, so I must trust Bob. And so really a good thing to do is just keep things real as far as you can. And it is tough, right? So my personal rule is if I haven't met you in person or shared a conversation with you or done some business with you, I'm not going to accept your LinkedIn request. And that's just my rule. Now, that's not 100% foolproof, right? Because somebody could be targeting me and build up a great pretext, a great story, and I'm having conversations with this person. Maybe they're a vendor that I work with or a partner that I work with, and I've had countless phone conversations. Well, they could have been fabricating that the entire time, and now they've earned my trust and I've linked in with them or whatnot. So it's not 100% foolproof, but it will definitely cut down on the noise, right? It'll make you less of an easy target. You're not one of those people that just haphazardly says, oh, I have 50,000 LinkedIn connections and I only know 1% of those. So it does help a little bit.
And just on that, and I wanted to sort of just ask you on what would sort of be maybe an indicator of an odd phone call. What sort of, say you got the phone call out of the blue. I'm the grandmother. I'm sitting at home. My grandson calls me. Obviously, a request for money. If that's not something the grandson ordinarily does, is that strange? Is there anything else in there that might be a little bit of a tell that we could sort of look into?
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of when you're looking at the practice of social engineering, right, you want to put urgency on somebody and you want to garner sympathy from them, right? So any type of situation, right, where it's, oh, I need this immediately, or I'm stuck on the side of the road or in a foreign country, to your point, those should be raising red flags. So when you do kind of pick up on some of these things that might seem out of character, there's what's recommended, right, is kind of that same thing that a lot of times they tell you to do for your banking, right? Hang up and call them back at the legitimate number, right? And granted, right, that's not foolproof, right? There's SIM swapping attacks out there, but those are going to be a lot higher barriers to entry. So most of these scams and attacks against individuals, they're only going to be able to spoof outbound, right? Calling you. So I can make it appear like I'm calling you, James, as Sean's number, but if you hang up and call back, it's going to dial out to Sean's actual number. That's kind of the common scheme there. And then just touching back on Sean's point, right, about social media, it's a lot of times about locking down kind of what's exposed out there, which is incredibly difficult to do these days, right? It doesn't take a lot of source material to make those deepfake videos, of yourself, James. It only took about 5 or 6 screenshots of your face. It didn't take, any robust data or anything these days.
Thank you for improving my hairline, by the way. That was appreciated. Yeah. But it's just insane. I think the level this can go to. But I'm just putting myself in the sort of position of, say, I am a finance controller, CFO has called me and it's very urgent, all these things are going on there. If it is genuinely an emergency, I guess you could sort of play the card of, I've got a bad line, let me call you back, or something like that. And then so you haven't got to say to your CFO that could be your CFO, I think you could be a hacker, let me call you back type thing, because that could obviously ruffle feathers, and especially if you're not an overly sort of extrovert or confrontational person, I guess.
That's a fair point, but I mean, at the same time, right? I think we need to have these open and candid conversations about being security aware and being guarded, and right, that's a good thing for the organization as a whole, right? You're safeguarding that company's assets. So I think we need to shift that culture. Not that it's ruffling feathers, but that it's protecting the organization. But I mean, likewise, right? There's other vectors kind of in an enterprise. So you want to make sure within your company, if you're talking to your CFO, right, you're using official channels. If you're getting just a cell phone call after hours, or, you know, rather than maybe Teams or WebEx or Zoom, whatever the organization uses, make sure those things are occurring within that space. And a lot of times that'll give you the ability to see that they're actually a verified participant, right? They're connected via their work laptop, and they've, you know, gone through whatever MFA process, which everybody should be using MFA nowadays, particularly in an enterprise environment. So those would be kind of, I guess, how you bypass those attacks, particularly impersonating, high level leadership.
Nice. Would that sort of tackle the scenario we drew up on earlier with the CFO was being imitated as a deepfake? That would sort of rule that out, take that off the table, I guess.
Right. So, I mean, as far as if you're looking at to hop into a Zoom call, I'm assuming this individual sent a Zoom link, right? And certainly if it was their own hosted instance, right, they would be verified because it's their own instance. But that's, if you're inviting them, you have to make sure it's right. The internal company instance of Zoom or of Teams, WebEx, whatever it might be. And yeah, that'll give you the ability to validate, you know, these emails line up. This individual is who I think this individual is, basically.
Understood. Okay, cool. And then to echo what you were saying, Andy, there, and then Sean, there's security awareness and training we can do around this.
Absolutely, yeah. So security awareness, I think, is one of the best approaches to mitigate or identify and practice identifying a lot of these technologies. So just the act of actually going through the process, right? So if you're on a Teams or Zoom, pick your web flavor, right, of web conferencing there. And you notice that everyone in your organization pops up maybe with a little green checkbox, and all of a sudden somebody joins that channel and it says external, and you're wondering, wow, this person normally, pops up as a green checkbox, but this time it says external. What's going on with that? Having that healthy dose of curiosity and wanting to verify is definitely good, right? So especially being wary if all of a sudden that happens, coupled with the CEOs now showing up as external and asking you to create him a new account or reset his password immediately. Something just seems a little off. It's okay to check. So I have a military background, and military does a lot of training. And the reason we do that is we fight like we train like we fight. So you want to have experience and training dealing with a matter so that when it actually happens, you have something to fall back on in your mind and say, wait a minute, I kind of remember this from my training. What should I do? How should I respond to this, right? And just the more familiar you are with recognizing it, the easier it's going to be when it actually happens. Another thing you can do is always ensure that you have layered validation processes in place, especially for businesses. You always want to use out-of-band communications or official channel communications to conduct business. A good example of this, at a previous company, we had someone reach out to HR, and it was from a personal email address, and they were pretending to be one of our vice presidents. And they actually were able to convince HR to change their payroll information. Wow. So this person's the actual person's paycheck went to a separate account, and they didn't notice it for, I think it was a payroll cycle or two, until they realized, wait a minute, why am I not getting paid? And when they checked into it, they said, well, you had requested to change your account. And so an issue with that was rectified was you must submit all requests through official company channels when it has to do with payroll changes. And then we added a step-by-step way to verify that with multiple processes in place to make sure that that request is valid. But a good way to handle that would be to simply pick up the phone, dial that person's number of record that's in your system at your company and say, hey, Bob, did you just make this request? And it's an easy way to verify, is doing the out-of-band communication channel.
Yeah, I must admit we've had a few of these come through at a very low level, not as sophisticated as this, thankfully, knock on wood. But yeah, I think it seems to be that there's a huge wave of this, coming or about to come through in much more volume. I mean, what are you guys seeing in terms of what's next?
Yeah, I think it's not slowing down anytime soon, right? There's threat actors seeing a lot of success with these attack vectors. And right, that's just going to inspire more and more attacks, particularly in combination with other attack vectors and other technologies. I'm sure it's going to be used pretty soon in these ransomware schemes and all sorts of other ways, hacktivism and gathering just secrets from companies and organizations, right? Kind of embedding themselves as a lot of threat actors do and sitting there for a long period of time. So it's going to be that initial access vector, I think, as we continue to move forward. And as this technology and other technologies grow, right, you're going to see kind of what's been happening for years and years, right? As a commercial technology grows, so does its kind of dark web or malicious counterpart. We've seen it with, things like ChatGPT, right? We've got Dark Gemini and Tor GPT now that are, developing, payloads and all sorts of malicious data on the dark web side based on a legitimate, valid tool that's actually providing value to organizations. And I think as we continue down this path, right, it's going to spark a lot of these ethical and legal debates around the technology, as it always does with any, type of cyber weapon. But that's not going to stop the actual cyber threat actors, right? Cybercrime hasn't stopped just because we've, deemed it illegal. It may help, however, to curb some of those low-level personal attacks. So kind of like what Sean was talking about, what's happening with teenagers and kind of low-level scams, at least, within the country's borders. They have some ability to at least enforce against that. However, it's not going to stop, offshore threat actors by any means.
Yeah, I guess it's that forever game of cat and mouse. And it's just now moving at such scale and such pace that's what AI is, I guess,
Absolutely. Just like anything that you hear any buzzword in cybersecurity, it's usually a cat and mouse approach, and it's everlasting, always ongoing. That's what actually keeps our jobs interesting in cybersecurity, is you never really master any one thing, because the minute you have it mastered, somebody else has already figured out a way to circumvent it, right? And you're constantly playing cat and mouse. It's kind of a game of whack-a-mole sometimes. So the evolution of detection and invasion is going to just keep going, and it's going to keep improving. It's kind of like ransomware, right? When ransomware first came out, everybody was talking about it, and then they figured out some ways to kind of mitigate or defend against that, and then ransomware got even better. And then you have to improve and get better on the defensive side, and it keeps going and elevating. And at some point, it's going to get to the point where it's almost non-detectable. So really, it's that importance of driving home the awareness training and continually evaluating what you're seeing and just being up on your game. Kind of like phishing awareness training, right? Most organizations conduct phishing awareness. People are getting pretty good at spotting a phishing email. Well, this is a whole new vector, a whole new medium. So it's a matter of just wrapping your mind around that and training on that. A good example of how this is also just getting better and better each year. I was at a conference in October, and they talked about a video that went viral of Will Smith eating a bowl of spaghetti. And they showed this video from 2023.
Okay.
And there were some obvious quirks to it. You could kind of tell maybe it looked digitized. They redid this video 1 year later in 2024, and it was completely undiscernible. There's no way that you could tell that it really wasn't Will Smith eating a bowl of spaghetti. You thought maybe it's a clip from one of his movies or something like that. So it's getting exponentially better each year. So I would say, in 5 years from now, it's going to be to the point where, yeah, you can't really tell. It's pretty scary.
Yeah, I think your last word there is probably to sum up this conversation. I know we've danced around and touched a number of different topics here, and I do hope I am genuinely speaking to some real people here, and it's not all a sort of big ploy. But guys, thank you for running through that. That was I know we've only sort of relatively light touched on some of these areas here, so we'll chuck some links below for your reach outs and your LinkedIn's and things if people wanted to get in touch. But thank you so much for running through all that. It's been insightful and, like I said, pretty terrifying at points, but yeah, I think let's keep up the awareness, let's see where tech takes us, and hopefully there's a bright future ahead.
Absolutely. Thank you for having us, James.
Thanks guys, take care.
James.